Hello and welcome. Thank you all for joining us here today in person and those of you online. We're really happy to be having this important conversation today with a wonderful lineup in person and also some great speakers online. Our topic today is looking at the role of human capital and the related support for Ukraine's national security, economic recovery, democratic strength, and ultimately a durable peace. My name is Shelby Magid, and I'm the Deputy Director of the Atlantic Council's Eurasia Center, and I'm very happy to be here with some of our colleagues and some other friends in Ukraine. Unfortunately, as we all know, last month marked 4 years since Russia launched its full-scale invasion of Ukraine, and 12 years since the beginning of its war of aggression. But throughout this time, Ukrainians have fought not only for their survival, but also for their country's future. Russia's war in Ukraine has had an immense human cost, causing widespread destruction not only physically across the country, but also through deep human suffering and displacement. The war has severely damaged Ukraine's economy, disrupted social systems, and affected nearly every sector of society. Infrastructure, homes, schools, hospitals, and more have been destroyed, while millions of people have been forced to flee their homes either internally or as refugees. The war has also strained healthcare, education, energy, agriculture, and other industries, and this is causing long-term challenges for recovery and development. As a result, the consequences extend far beyond the battlefield, reshaping Ukraine's society and economy in profound ways. But while Russia has tried to defeat Ukraine and destroy the nation as a sovereign independent state, it has failed, both on the battlefield, which we see constantly in the news, pay attention, and also in its efforts to crush Ukrainian resolve and morale. Ukraine has many advantages, not only in the remarkable drones and defense technologies we're also seeing in the news today, including those helping defend America and our allies against Iranian attacks, but also in its most strategic asset, and that's its people. So leveraging this human capital will be essential to building a strong economy and a resilient democracy for Ukraine's future. So that's what we're going to discuss today, and it's now my privilege to introduce our panelists. Online, we've got the Deputy Minister of Veterans Affairs, Oleg Shemensky. We've got Lana Zerkal, former Deputy Minister of Foreign Affairs of Ukraine for European Integration and a member of the Ukraine Facility Platform Coordination Committee. And in person, we have Oksana Necheprenko, non-resident senior fellow at the Atlantic Council's Eurasia Center, and Daria Zarivna, Pritzker Fellow at the University of Chicago's Institute of Politics, and a former advisor on communications to the head of the Office of the President of Ukraine. Thank you all for joining us. So we'll turn to our panelists for a moderated discussion and then get to audience Q&A. Those of you in person will have some microphones. Please get your questions ready, especially hard ones. And online, you can submit your questions at askac.org. All right. Deputy Minister, we'll start with you. And thank you for joining us, because when we're talking about Ukraine's people and recovery, it's critical that we're including veterans in this conversation. So my question to you, Ukraine's veteran population has increased significantly since Russia launched its full-scale invasion. How is your ministry handling the influx of veterans needing support for themselves, as well as their families and children, as well as preparing for the long-term needs of veterans as a key component of Ukraine's recovery?
Thank you very much, first of all, for taking on this issue. As you have said, it is becoming a bigger and bigger matter in Ukraine. And I'd like to start with fresh stats from 2025 that over 64% of Ukrainians have veterans within their family members and friends. And 80% of the adult population have veterans among their acquaintances. So really, we are now moving into the society of veterans. And I think this needs to be accounted for. This needs to be considered. And as government, we must react to this, and we must develop policies to reintegrate veterans back in the society. Now, to your question, in fact, Ukraine considers veterans as those who have been in active combat. And that's a very important distinction between Ukraine and some of the other NATO countries, for example, where pure service would lead to the status of a veteran. So we have over 1 million of those who have been in active combat, and this number is growing. Right now, you can largely demobilize due to a severe wound, and so the number of veterans actually returning from service is not that large, but it's still growing. But regardless of this, we expect these numbers to rise, of course, and therefore these individuals would require physical rehabilitation, mental health support, but also economic opportunities. And this is also the perspective that I think is under discussed, perhaps, that there was a portion of Ukrainians that have fled the country at the beginning of the war. There's a portion of Ukrainians that have joined the military to fight against the Russian aggression. And so when they come back, we want them to be a part of the recovery process. There is a significant demand on the labor market from the American businesses, from European businesses, from Ukrainian businesses, and we want these individuals, which are, by the way, very young. I think the median is around 35-ish. The margins are also there. There are some extremes. There are individuals who have joined when they were 18. There was a famous veteran who was demobilized, I think, a couple of months ago. He said, after I served, I started learning how to pay utilities, because he joined when he was still essentially a teenager. He never done that, and then he has only learned these basic things after demobilization. So there are different perspectives, and the other one that I want to mention as a start is the defense and security, is because we do not need to look at the veterans as those that only require support. They're very much driven individuals that have a very unique fighting experience, and they are ready and keen to share it. I'm sure that we would partly lead in the U.S. example, where veterans in the U.S. have started large businesses, such as FedEx, by the way, that was started by a veteran who was flying missions. Who was flying missions in Vietnam, and then he realized that logistics are also needed in the civilian world. So I'm sure there will be a lot of motivated individuals to replicate this in Ukraine, and this is very much what we as government want to support.
Thank you very much. And are you using digital services to get in touch with some of these veterans and potential economic opportunities?
Honestly, I'm very thankful that you asked this question, because for us, the digital services, and particularly some of those frontier ideas, as customer service through AI, are not a nice to have. For us, this is an opportunity to actually deliver the digital service, just because we unfortunately can't hire, we just don't have the resources to hire large numbers of customer support specialists to support the veterans that are coming back. And if we can offload this to automatic services, such as what we do, we know that somebody has a right to certain type of support, or maybe a payout. We can do this automatically. When the person comes out from the military service, we can introduce a process where this is done through our government application, and this will be delivered straight to someone's account. No questions asked, no need to prove anything additionally. And this is certainly what I'm working on. But equally, there are many other opportunities. Like, we've just created a national portal for veterans to consult on the services and benefits that the government provides. Because we've actually, last year, we've made a survey, and we've consulted 27,000 veterans that have indicated that that there's a lack of information of what the state can provide. And moreover, the information is really segmented across agencies, so you need to visit 25 different websites to acquire information about this or how to get a certain benefit. And that's why we've created a national portal, national website, where everything is in one place, and you can just select a category such as healthcare, and all of the healthcare support, rehabilitation support that's provided by government is listed there in the same manner, with the step-by-step guides, for example. So for us, digital service delivery is not only a nice to have, but it really is a way to deliver these services, especially for those with limited physical abilities. And this is why, for example, digital accessibility is a big topic in Ukraine, or at least we're trying to make this because it's a big geographically diverse country. For if you have limited physical abilities, could be difficult to travel. So getting services digitally is the way to get services, or perhaps telehealth. So we are very much exploring these different opportunities, and we are ready to test different approaches in Ukraine, because this is the way to deliver government support to those who really need it.
That's great to hear. Thank you. And I'm constantly learning about new ways that I can be impressed by Ukraine's digital capabilities every time I visit. All right, Lana, let's talk a little bit about the winter. Ukraine just survived one of the coldest winters in living memory, made extremely difficult by Russia's coordinated campaign to destroy the energy infrastructure. It's abundantly clear that energy resilience will be central to Ukraine's reconstruction and future recovery. What is Ukraine doing now to build up its energy resilience?
Thank you for this very important question, but I cannot say that we need it after the end of the war. We need it now, because we lack in about 9 gigawatts of electricity, and we will not be able to go through next winter without additional at least 4 gigawatts of new energy. So the government and the businesses need to join efforts nowadays in order to make sure that next winter will be less harsh than this one, and that we will be more resilient and will be able to survive despite all these attacks on our energy and infrastructure system. So the core for this are our regions and their ability to develop new energy, not only huge objects, but mostly small objects of generation. And that's where we definitely require a lot of assistance and necessity to cooperate with different businesses. What we face now, it's not only a lack of energy and generation, but also a lack of human resources and expertise. So mostly our regions, they're not capable to develop these new projects in energy, and they're not capable to understand what are new modern technologies that can be used and how to make sure that they work efficiently and effectively. So that is the main problem for regions now. Of course, they also need investments, and they also require trust in local authorities and trust in the stable political system. So that's our four main issues for the next winter.
Thank you very much. Just on this topic, earlier today in a different meeting, I was asked by someone how Ukrainians are feeling after the winter. Could I ask you briefly, Oksana, Daria? I was asked, what's the morale? How did the winter impact people? Can you touch on that?
We are alive.
I'm glad, yes.
I think that's the main feeling that Ukrainians are now having, because honestly, the 1st of March in Kiev, for example, it was sunny, and I physically saw people stopping on the streets looking at the sunshine and kind of trying to acknowledge that the winter is probably over and we are still here. But the general, I'll touch a bit more about our psychological situation and the level of mental health, but we are exhausted. If just tell you honestly and truthfully, we have no idea how we are still surviving, and we are.
I agree. Sorry, this really struck the nerve here.
No, I'm glad you answered, because people ask me, but it's important to hear from Ukrainians. All right, last word to you.
I would say that this year Russians invented a Holodomor. Genocide was called, this new invention of Russia's death war machine. And I really like the quote of one of our civil activists and the head of Come Back Alive charity fund, Taras Chmut. He said that we had won this winter. because Russians use it cold as a warfare, and this used winter as a warfare, and we won. We came to this point, and we are still keeping resilience, and we're still keeping all together, and we're keeping our faith in our victory. So yeah.
And we also know that the winter in some of the states of US also was harsh. So imagine that, plus the absence of electricity, absence of water, and heat sometimes. So now Ukrainians know what is, you know, the ratings of what is really needed to stay alive. So if you would ask me, it's heat, and then only water, and then probably I can survive without electricity in my home. But you know that.
Yeah, but the winter is coming.
Thank you, Lana. As usual,
The winter is coming, and we need to keep it in mind because we don't have much time to be prepared for the next winter, and that's a real challenge.
That's a great point. Thank you. All right, Daria, how should the Ukrainian government and Ukrainian businesses help the younger generation access opportunities and capital for developing their skills to best support Ukraine's future and economy?
Thanks a lot for this question. Thanks for having me here, and thanks a lot for arranging this crucially important discussion. I want to start with making you imagine the following scene. It's 3 a.m. in Kharkiv, an air raid siren. The young woman, 24, wakes up, closes her apartment's window, drops her laptop into the backpack, and goes to the nearest shelter. It's loud there, people are talking, children cry. She sits in a folding chair, and she starts to push a commit code. She starts coding, because her client in New York is waiting for a deadline, for a 9 a.m. deadline. So she ships a feature just before the sunrise. This is an actual story. Before entering politics, I was an owner of the strategic communication agency, which was working mainly with Ukrainian startups and with an owner of Ukrainian media, like Ukrainian TechCrunch or VentureBeat or something. So that is one of my former colleagues of the journalist who switched into IT specialist. And this is how her typical Tuesday looks like. So the thing is, why I decided to start there is because this image contains everything that policymakers need to understand. It has urgency, talent, and the will to build under fire. And also, it shows what is the stake. And the stake is to encourage the Ukrainian youth by creating conditions for them in which they will choose to stay and to create and to build. But I guess that the key factor here, and I really like this quote of Abraham Lincoln, that the best way to predict future is to create it. So the key factor here is that this war should end on terms favorable to Ukraine. And the main thing which needs to be provided is guaranteeing the security. So step one, we need to provide the security, secure the country. And the second step is, of course, education, because I guess that any state apparatus, and Ukrainian one is not an exception, is still very far behind the actual stage of how modern knowledge is acquired, and the half-life of knowledge at the beginning of 20th century was around 35 years. In 1960s, it was around 10 years, and now it's like 2-5 years, which means that a student which completes his 4 or 5 degrees gets to the point where the knowledge, especially regarding the rapidly and fast-changing industry, gets to the point where the knowledge which he gets during his education becomes obsolete before the time he finishes his education. And of course, here is the point where state and business should align. State should create the best conditions to get through this change smoothly, and it should be reform-friendly and flexible, and Ukrainian business must be much more engaged into the educational process. I think that Ukrainian companies should not longer come and just take the best graduates. They should grow the talents from within, which means embed university hubs, fund-paid internships, maybe create the path where 3 months skill boot camps will turn into an actual paid contract, which is very important. I guess that I will come up with a few important, a few numbers that matter about Ukrainian tech ecosystem. Now it counts roughly 2,000 tech specialists, and 245,000 of whom work directly from the state. And by the way, Oksana, around 35% of tech specialists are women, which is twice more than a decade ago, which is important, I guess. In 2024, the general the general industry capital was around $7.48 billion, and in general, Ukrainian startups raised more than $462 million in 2025, and now we have more than 2,600 active Ukrainian startups. So all these numbers show expanding and very resilient system under pressure. And here we come to the third point. The third factor is that we need to provide the capital and contracts for these talents. And here I would like to jump to US companies. And I guess that US companies can build direct contracts and bring R&D projects into Ukraine. I think that they can get in exchange the companies and startups who can test products and services in the real conditions. And this is something like a very unique proposal. So I believe that, So I believe that it all contains from 3 steps. First, secure the country. Second, make continuous and industry-aligned education provided, and anchor talents with capital and contracts. This is it.
Sounds like a plan.
Yeah.
I saw some excitement from our online panelists. Did either of you want to add anything on that? Deputy Minister?
Yeah, no, of course. Frankly, I can only second, and because we see the same attitude, in veterans who want to, they have lots of ideas, and I wanted to bring an example of a gentleman who has served in the army, and then he actually wanted to bring back to the community, and so he started working in rehabilitation center, and then he became an advisor to the mayor of Ivano-Frankivsk, which is one of the larger Ukrainian cities, on accessibility. So there's a lot of interest, and I think, as Daria has just said, all of these individuals, they just need a little push, a little bit of support to polish their skills, or maybe a little grant to get things started, and they will really grow. And I think this is what we can export to, because we are resilient, and we know how to make something out of nothing, which is essentially, I think, our business model. We have also seen this, and I just wanted to respond to some of what Lana was saying, that Ukrainian businesses right now, because of the winter, are resilient. They have generators. Ukrainian households, those who could afford it, they have bought home batteries. And so when the power goes out, we keep running. It's not cheap, it's very difficult, but we keep running. And we have seen, for example, in summer, I think 2025, there were some southern European states that have suffered a massive blackout, and nothing was working because nobody was prepared. And I think this has implications for the wider continent, where we live in a way, we have faced the challenges that others haven't, and that's why we have learned how to respond to them, and we would like to share this, and this is what I think we can reciprocate with, this resilience. We are talking, for example, with our colleagues from the neighboring states, to perhaps share the expertise of veterans with their reserves. Because now their reserves are being reserve personnel is being recruited across Europe. But what standard are you going to teach them to? Is this the sort of slightly outdated program of the pre 2022 warfare? I don't think it makes a lot of sense. And so Ukrainian veterans can share this. Ukrainian civilians can share this, and that's why we have a lot of ways to collaborate.
Lana, do you briefly want to respond?
Yeah, I'm afraid I am not so optimistic because we definitely on the limit of our resistance, human resistance and all kind of resistance. And we need to admit this and to face this problem because our women with children, they remain abroad, and that's the 5th year of their life abroad. And they already accumulated their efforts there, not in Ukraine. And we need to understand how to be attractive for them and how to ensure that they have equal living standards here in Ukraine and that we are attractive as a country. So that's why we need to pay more attention to the conditions where our people live, how to grow them, and how to ensure that these teenagers that are now 12 or 14 have the adequate abilities and adequate chances to grow in Ukraine and not to think about leaving the country.
Thank you. Well, that leads us perfectly to turning to you, Oksana. You wear many hats. I'm very proud that one of them is a non-resident senior fellow at the Atlantic Council's Eurasia Center, but you are also a co-founder of the Masha Fund, which has done significant work to support women and children affected by the war. So from your perspective with that role, and then of course just being a woman living in Ukraine, what are the government and civil society in Ukraine doing to help Ukraine's women recover and rebuild? How much focus is there on supporting women in accessing economic growth opportunities, and what more needs to be done on that and anything that Lana just said?
Thank you so much for having me. And I think the speakers brilliantly showed you the situation that Ukrainian human capital is now. Also, it's this crazy mixture of pain that we endure, but also motivation to fight for it and build something new. And we understand that Ukrainians today is 1,478th day of full-scale invasion. That means that almost every day drones and rockets are flying on our heads, and in frontline communities it's every day happening. So we are now talking with you about Ukraine as a nation where every generation is affected by war. So I honestly hoped that my grandma lived during the Second World War. I hope that my mom would be the first generation who doesn't know what is war, but now all of us are there. So in all of this state and situation, we are talking about the opportunity and the need somehow to rehabilitate women or children or human capital, and honestly, it's impossible. Recovering and rebuilding during full-scale invasion is not possible in the full way. So for now, what we can talk about, to give all the tools and the instruments for the people to get the means to live and to continue living and to continue fighting, but we can be talking about full recovery and rehabilitation starting only after full-scale invasion. We hope that it will happen at some point. And just for you to understand what is the general numbers, more than half of Ukrainians are experiencing difficult mental health conditions and problems. Around 40% already have neurological diseases caused by stress and trauma. Ukrainians say that these 4 years of war aged them by 10, 15 years. And on the contrary, some diseases became younger. Like heart attacks or strokes or even menopause.
Getting them now.
People are getting them now at younger age, like around 40, sometimes 35. The same we have if we are talking about women. So women are, apart from the soldiers and children, are the ones who also paying one of the highest costs of war. So we are talking about, of course, mental health cost. We are talking about reproductive cost. That women are having. We are talking about economic cost, economic instability, caregiving cost, because lots of women are now becoming the caregivers of all the families, but also the communities that they are responsible for. And let me also give a small paint you the picture of what about the children during the war. So Ukrainian children, straight after the COVID and online, which also US experienced the difficulty of this, went straight into the bomb shelters. So we are talking about some children who haven't been to schools for 6 years. So according to the international surveys, Ukrainians are now 1.5 to 2 years behind their peers from neighboring countries in learning outcomes. In reading skills, we are 2 years behind. If we are talking from students from frontline territories, we are talking about 4 to 5 years of learning. If we are talking about children from frontline territories, 83% of them are in emotional stress and show development delays. 60% of them, of students all over Ukraine, says that their knowledge has deteriorated because of fatigue, stress, online education, and 64% of children just missed classes because of power outage, air alerts, and generally exhaustion. So it may sound like the statistics of the consequences of war, but make no mistakes. These are exact KPIs that Russia is having in order to destroy human capital in Ukraine. They don't want just to destroy our cities, our front lines, our industry. They want to destroy the human capital. They want its Holodomor, like with its genocide of Ukrainian nation. It's the humanitarian genocide, and Russians want to destroy our future, for sure.
Thank you. I'm glad you brought.
We'll talk a bit of what can be done here, so don't worry.
Okay, great. Well, I'll turn back to the Deputy Minister. What are some of the challenges that you've seen in getting Ukraine's veterans to engage with some of the state-supported services, including the digital services that you've mentioned? And what are some of the ways the ministry and the wider Ukrainian government can overcome those challenges? And have you found that there's any regional differences in veterans' engagement with state-supported services?
Look, we've talked about it a little bit, but I want the human perspective to always be there. We 2 days ago we've been in Zhytomyr, which is a town 2 hours away from Kiev, and we've been to a hospital where military service members are being treated. And this is where you really see how things are on the ground. Somebody's being treated, and they realize that they will likely not serve any longer, and they start asking questions what the state can actually support them with. And this is sometimes the first step of interfacing with government. And they usually ask their buddies because there's an issue of trust, and there are challenges to find information. And to respond to this, we have, for example, instituted a system of veteran support specialists. So there are over 2,300 individuals that are kind of social workers scattered across Ukraine that are financed by the national government. And they are sometimes the first point of entry into the system, because that's a human being that you can talk to and ask questions. And sometimes these questions are difficult, and sometimes these questions are about obtaining benefits, but we see them as routers, really, who can then route to maybe a mental health support specialist or to a website or to another institution. And I think the challenge is really the fact that the system was not prepared for the numbers that we see right now. The system was prepared for a pre-full scale number of veterans, and now we are essentially developing building the plane as we're flying it, to be prepared for even larger numbers to come in. And that's why we look at automatically delivered services, and we look at I'm sorry, AI chatbots that can respond to questions, and we're working with some of American companies on that, by the way. We're even looking at a possibility to use LLMs to poll individuals regarding their mental health, just to have this first interface and first query happen sooner. But the other aspect I'd really want to bring in is are people with disabilities, people with special physical needs, because some of our polls say that over 72% of people expect issues with employment and reintegration due to the lack of inclusivity in inclusive spaces. So they're still serving, or they're being treated, and they don't know, but they expect it. And I think this is where we have at a high cost, but we have a chance to become a more inclusive society overall. Because if we build accessible spaces, both digitally and physically, for veterans, everyone else will benefit. And this is actually how we're looking at. And in fact, we are building veteran spaces or veteran hubs across Ukraine. 7 of them will be probably launched this summer, with 15 more to come. And so there's a large plan to build this, and that will create a comprehensive service delivery system where there's a physical location where you can come and ask questions, but also there are digital services. And if you live in a maybe rural or a mountainous community, you can access things digitally. You can call a veteran support specialist. But in terms of challenges, I think it's the burden is really partly on the businesses too. It's the adaptation of the workplace, and this has not happened at scale. But we really encourage, especially larger businesses that have a little bit more resources, to adapt their workplaces for veterans. Because look, if you look at the example of some of the European countries, such as Croatia, their War of Independence ended in 1995. 30 years on, they're still managing the veterans policy. They even have a deputy prime minister for veterans, and that's why, because this will be a lingering issue for years to come, it would make sense for businesses to invest in adapting the workplaces. And the sooner we start, the better. And maybe that's where we can pick up some of the international experience of doing this from companies abroad.
Thank you very much. And a lot of that turns to what I want to ask you about in many ways. So you were Ukraine's Deputy Minister of Foreign Affairs for European integration from 2014 to 2019. And looking at Ukraine's current European integration trajectory, where do you see improvement? Where is there significant work to be done? And how does this all tie together with what we're talking about?
Definitely, I see an improvement on the European side. They admitted our aspiration to become a member of the European Union, and I definitely cherish this change. 10 years ago, it was hardly to imagine that we can be a candidate country. So that's why, in this respect, war gave us a boost in our aspirations. But nowadays, we need to admit that there are a lot of homework that should be done, and not only on the legislation field, but also in administrative practices. And that also connects to regions and necessity to pay more attention to those people who are living in regions, because they lack attention, and they definitely suffer from the lack of human resources. We send our best sons and daughters to the front line, and we lack highly experienced and qualified work labor. So that's why we face this challenge of this lack of qualified labor when we develop new projects. Actually, we don't have it, and we need to understand that our progress can start only from the admission of the fact that on the ground we don't have specialists that can implement European norms and put forward new projects for the development. And that is one of the stumbling blocks. Because European integration is not only adoption of laws, that's an everyday practices. And that's where we need to develop kind of new culture of participation of people in everyday life of our country. We need to decrease the distance between people and the government, because they need to be involved in everyday life of their communities. And that's where the European integration needs other boosts. And that's where we need to pay attention.
Thank you very much. Daria, how has the war in Ukraine changed the population's approach to business, entrepreneurship, technological development, especially among young people? You gave us one example, but I'd love to hear a little bit more.
The invasion didn't freeze innovation. I guess that it caused and triggered a major mindset shift. And I believe that Ukrainians stopped fearing change. And taking into account that we all have got used to Fukuyama's idea of the end of the history and missed the moment where the Third World War showed up in the door, I believe that this is a crucially important skill, and we Ukrainians came to this point much better prepared than anyone. Sorry for that. But what I also believe is important here is that people who would never have launched their projects in peacetime started to open small and medium-sized business enterprises now because the survival demanded it. And also, I think that we have this mode of live fast, not to die young. I call it as like, a disciplined agility, not recklessness. And this is not a Gen Z story alone. I believe that volunteers, mid-term professionals, and older workers, they all have shifted. And I guess that entrepreneurship became a civic duty in Ukraine. I think that the state, which relies on its citizens, is much stronger than the state which makes citizens dependent on the state. And Russia is certainly a second kind, while we in Ukraine trying to build their first kind. So that's my answer.
Thank you. All right, Oksana, the EU and the World Bank recently conducted a damage and needs assessment in Ukraine and found that 1 out of 6 Ukrainian households have been destroyed, and that women and children comprise over 60% of those in need. Where the government cannot or does not provide, how can philanthropy and advocacy support those suffering financially from Russia's violence?
I think that working together is the only formula that can be viable, because the scale of the consequences of the catastrophe in Ukraine is so huge that nothing that we are doing alone is enough. It's just impossible. The numbers that Deputy Minister was mentioned is unthinkable about the number of veterans, the number of women, children, all of this. Again, we can now jungle the numbers, that the general idea that we are facing one of the biggest the humanitarian challenges in the recent history. And Ukraine is fighting and is trying to cope. And when we are able, but our international partners, our support is the one who are enabling us to do that. So the ideal formula is the coordination between civil society, government, and international partners. And this is actually what is happening. A lot of civil society organizations, like I'm leading one in education, a global one in Women in Russia Fund. So what we do, for example, psychological rehabilitation of women victims of war. We pilot something, and then together with the government, we try to scale it, the formulas that work like most successfully. Or we go and find opportunities to support those vulnerable communities that are, again, the government just doesn't have the means and the opportunity to help. So that's where civil society jumps in. But we are doing that. We have this gentleman's code in Ukraine that Ukrainian businesses should donate to war. And that means that civil society charities should go to international partners and ask for help for the ones who cannot fund war directly. So, and this is the formula which is happening. But as our colleagues on the panel mentioned, it's now the mission of our lives. It's not a project that has the final date, the start date we know, but the final date, it's the mission of our lives that will be happening here.
Thank you. I have many more questions for our panelists, and I could talk to you for hours, but to be fair, I will ask one more question to our panelists and then turn to the audience. So if those of you in person have a question, we'll have microphones shortly. But before I turn to you, Daria, I do want to ask you about one critical aspect here, especially when we talk about the humanitarian impact. When we're talking about Ukraine's future and human capital, we cannot overlook one of the most tragic aspects of Russia's war, and one that I know you've spent a lot of time working on, and that's the systematic abduction and deportation of Ukrainian children by the Russian Federation. So beyond the immediate harm to those children, their families, and communities, what long-term impact could this have on Ukraine's recovery and its democratic strength and security?
Thanks for this question, and thanks for paying attention to this. I left the office of the President of Ukraine in June 2025, so I'm not in charge of this question since then. But now when I came to Washington and talking to everybody, I just realized how important it is to keep it in a spotlight, how important it is to have discussions on that, to talk about that, to keep that pressure on Russia. This is extremely important, especially as a part of negotiations, of course. So deported children, it's a humanitarian atrocity. It's the crime against Ukrainian future, especially when we speak about their human capital. These all are the future doctors, teachers, which will never come back, and this is tragic. We have not only, but we have 19,546 cases documented. And this is not the final number. The actual number can be much higher. We don't have enough time, so I cannot cover such aspects of this question as militarization of these children, how Russians turn young Ukrainians into the soldiers against their own people, against their own country. This is beyond any level of cynicism. So what I want to say, we need to keep documenting these cases first. We need to keep the family reunification as a priority in all the negotiations regarding that issue. We need to keep pressure on Russia. We need to talk about more sanctions, about diplomatic pressure. And in June 2025, as a part of negotiations, as a part of confidence-building measures, we gave the list of 356 Ukrainian children to Russian negotiation team. And we had a suggestion that at least some of these children, because this is just a small part, this is just a small list, at least some of these children can be returned as a part of confidence-building measures. And I'm very grateful to a US delegation who very much supported this idea, and the State Secretary Rubio, who was very well briefed on this matter, on this issue. And nothing happened since then, nothing. It's still there. So we need to talk about it, because I'm afraid that we will lose momentum, that we will lose the momentum when we can really change something, when we can make them return at least some of these children. Thank you.
Thank
I
you.
think that generally what Ukrainians is now also feeling is that not only we are gone out of the spotlight, which is understandable, but that a huge part of, if we're talking about potential rebuilding, rehabilitation, is also justice being served. And this is the question that we are not hearing in recent times anywhere. So that's why we are also using this opportunity just to remind that the rehabilitation, rebuilding, building back better, whatever can be done if we at some point reach peace talks, the justice will be the question, because it's also, mental part of the rehabilitation.
Thank you. All right, our audience in person, please raise your hand if you have a question. All right, back there, we'll have a microphone, and please introduce yourself.
Hello, my name is Maria. I'm a Ukrainian journalist working in DC. Thank you for being here tonight. Thank you for raising this topic. I wanted to ask, maybe the question is a little weird, but I want to hear a real answer, because it's the one that is a big passion of mine and is disturbing me too. We're talking about security as the first measure to establish returning people to Ukraine to start rebuilding process and healing process too. We're talking about justice. Without justice, there cannot be long peace, because Russia will launch another invasion elsewhere or in Ukraine again. Over the last year, we know that justice is off the table because the US delegation wants to speak to the Russians, so justice was dismantled. We're talking about security guarantees, which over the past year, we now see how states are acting in different parts of the world. And it's really hard to believe that this is something that can be sustainable, that can be achieved, that can be upheld by actions, not just words. We also see that the pressure towards Russia is not that hard. Yes, so in the realm of the past year and everything that has been happening, and that there is no pressure on Russia even to return some of the children, and as the goodwill gesture, what is your real feeling of how this can be achieved? Because it seems like it's something that we really need, but it seems like an unattainable dream. What are the steps that can be made towards security, justice, returning children? What do you need from states, and do you think it's achievable? Thank you.
Thank you for that question. I think that could take a whole other discussion, but I'll turn to you two if you have some brief thoughts on that.
Oksana, I suggest that you start.
I think that Ukrainians are living for all of these years in two parallel realities. In one reality, we are keeping fighting and planning ourselves as the war will never end. And we have to count on ourselves because, as Lana said, the winter is coming, because as Deputy Minister said, we have already soldiers or veterans who are preparing also for the next stages of life. So this is one thing, and Ukraine should keep building itself for a long, long, long time, thinking as if we can be or would be left alone in this fight. On the other hand, we should keep using all of the opportunities that we have, though they are staying or small, in order to continue negotiations and reminding about justice, children, bringing them back. So we don't have any other opportunities than to continue playing this game and believing that if we play it right, and if we play all of our cards right that we have, then we can reach some of the successes. So this is a strange reality. There are some plans. Whether they will be successful or not, nobody knows, because there is one person on earth who can answer the question whether he wants to finish this war or not, and we can't ask him this question, him or his. So that's why.
Who's that person?
I think Putin, no? This evil guy. So that's why the answer is keep working, keep pushing. That's the only thing that keeps us insane. I mean, we're all crazy, but maybe there is a chance for that.
I fully agree here. We need more pressure. We need to cut off Russia's oil lifeline. We need more sanctions. We need to still keep insisting on them returning these children. There are plenty of ways. There is mediation. There is like the official negotiation process. So you just use all the opportunities, all the leverage which you have, all the channels of communication, and that's it. For what do we need from US side? More pressure, stronger position we need here.
Thank you. We've got some more questions. First, I'm going to turn to one online, and Lana, this will be for you, from Gerald Jenkins. Let me see if I can do our tech. Oh, did I get it? Hold on. This is user error. Okay, I'm going to read his question. Question to Lana. Ukraine's power generation capacity has been cut significantly by Russian strikes, and you rightly say Ukraine must prepare for the next winter now. What can be done to grow power generation in a relatively short time frame and in a short answer?
Ukraine created all necessary conditions for the new generation to come as soon as possible. So we decreased the number of permits that is required for any kind of construction and development. We do need companies that they're ready to come to Ukraine and to invest together with Ukrainian businesses. Actually, this is a very lucrative market, and we soon become a member of the European Union market as well. So definitely come to Ukraine and build with us.
Thank you. All right, raise your hands. A question over here, if I get the mic in the gray suit. Yes.
Yes. Well, thank you so much for this conference. My name is Kirill. I represent the Ukrainian recruitment agency that focuses on relocation of foreigners to Ukraine to satisfy the demand from Ukrainian businesses. So my question has two dimensions. First, do you think that considering the potential high volume of those foreigners that will be coming to Ukraine, it is necessary to do certain classes of cultural adaptation of theirs to Ukrainian values like language, culture, history, etc. And the second dimension, Ukrainian government has stated that throughout 2026, it is important to conduct the research on bringing foreigners into Ukraine. Do you think that this research should include cultural adaptation of foreigners? Thank you.
And we'll take one more question before you answer that. I think right back there.
Thanks. Luke Zahner with the Center for American Progress, and thanks for organizing this. You outlined kind of two capacity kind of issues, the short-term need for project development and the lack of human capacity to do that, and then the longer-term need to reintegrate veterans and upskill people in order to fill these jobs in the longer term, while also giving people jobs to encourage them to resettle. We talk about this at every single Ukraine recovery conference, the partners of Ukraine with Ukraine, and I feel like we circle the issue, but we don't really get into it enough. And I would like to know if there are any suggestions as to what concrete things partners of Ukraine could be doing to help support these two goals and make sure that we're also helping in the long term while not undermining some of the longer term objectives by things that we do in the short term to perhaps provide some capacity for Ukraine.
Thank you very much. All right, who wants to take those on?
Maybe Deputy Minister.
Deputy Minister, do you want to address that briefly?
Yeah, absolutely. And thanks for raising this really. The practical side of things is hire Ukrainian veterans. There are many global companies that want to do this. In fact, we are talking to probably all of the primes or most of the primes, and one of the primes, for example, we are developing a memorandum of understanding to bring veterans to their jobs because they're interested in. So, one, hire Ukrainian veterans. Two, ask your businesses to adapt workplaces to people with various physical needs. And importantly, they need to be empowered. So there's no need to babysit them and gather everyone around them. So a veteran wants a real job with real empowerment. That's what's important. And the third one is, we're now talking to donor governments, to partners, is to maybe gather some support funding and projects to introduce better systems in Ukraine, such as mental health system. It takes a lot of effort and resources because first you need to find therapists. Ukraine didn't historically have a great mental health support culture, so now there is great demand. And we need to find those practitioners who want to work in this. Second, we need to train them to work with war trauma. And really, the war trauma in Ukraine is uncomparable to anything that has existed in the world before in the last 70 years. And this is proven by research and analytics. And so these are the practical terms. So involve, hire, and also encourage your governments to contribute to what Ukraine does, because this is also the experience that we will be then sharing. I think lots of people in the audience have heard of Superhumans, which is the Veteran Rehabilitation Center and Prosthetics Center in Ukraine. Sadly, one may say they probably have the best prosthetics application experience in the world now, just because they are applying prosthetics to the most difficult cases at scale. And so this is the experience that we will be sharing, I guess, in future.
Thank you. Final comments, Lana, please.
Yeah, if I may, we are not going circles. We help communities to develop projects and to face these challenges and prepare pre-feasibility studies, how to use these low-hanging fruits and how to develop electricity projects already. And Dutch government helps us a lot in this. We also help Dutch businesses to understand the opportunities where they are and prepare it for them. For instance, the markets come and they are now ready to enter in these businesses. So we cannot say that there are no good practices in involvement of different countries in development of projects in Ukraine. Yes, there are not a lot of them and the scale is still small. That we are on this path and we welcome you to join our efforts, because we definitely need rehabilitation of all our utilities of sewage, water, and other types of utilities. And that will require a lot of resources and experience of different countries.
I would answer the question about the culture adaptation. Yes. So Ukrainians would need all foreigners, all the human capital that we can attract, and hopefully world can feel that, we honestly think that heart of Europe is beaten now in Ukraine. And that energy that we are showing, this is also energy to build something amazing. So every crazy ideas or projects you wanted to pilot before, come to Ukraine and do that. We now have all the opportunities. And yes, as the panelist also mentioned, it would be beneficial for the ones who are coming to Ukraine to be taught and a bit explained of what Ukrainians already lived through. Just for them to understand how it works. And of course, any additional cultural guidance is needed. One of my Go Global worked a lot with volunteers from 75 countries of the world. We always did several days of cultural preparation just to explain what is the country that you are now waking up in.
Thank you. Daria, any final comments?
No, I'm fine. Thank
All right. Well, we have the happy problem of too many questions and not enough time, so we will have to do more events on these topics and include these wonderful speakers again. So thank you to our speakers for your time. Thank you for joining us in person. Thank you so much, Deputy Minister, Lana, and thank you to our audience. To be continued.